As you work with Krita, you may be concerned about what happens if you change any of the settings with your brush presets. So let's take a look at what happens here. First of all, you might want to be familiar with Settings, Manage Resources. And in there you can manage bundles, but you can also import brushes, bundles, and presets, things like that. Now, brushes are different than the presets. The brushes are just the brush tips, the patterns, if you will. But in our case, one place that you want to be familiar with is this Open Resource folder. And when you click on that, it will bring up the folder where the resources are stored. And that's typically in App Data, Roaming, Krita, in Windows. I'm not sure where it is on Apple, but you can look that up in the documentation. But the thing that I want to show you here is there's this Paint Op presets. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. There's also a KIS Paint Up preset blacklist, and then the resource bundle blacklist. Now, a blacklist is something that just says you won't include this or you block this out. So that's what a blacklist is. But if we drill into this Paint Up presets, we see that there's nothing in there to start with. And then if I bring up the file KIS Paint Up Preset Blacklist, it's an XML file, which I won't go into details of there, but there's basically the point is there's really nothing between the resource file list. And the same thing is true for the resource bundle blacklist. Now, we're not going to be adding or deleting bundles, so but if you did, that would be populated. So let's go into any of the tools here. So I'm going to select the Airbrush Soft, and I'm going to now click on this button to bring up the editor. And sorry, that didn't originally capture everything. So what we're going to do is just make a simple change. Let's change the diameter of this preset here. Now notice it shows you a little warning here that basically says the settings for this preset have been changed, and I can choose to overwrite or save as a new brush preset. So let's go ahead and overwrite, because that's the scary thing, right? So I'm going to click on Overwrite the Brush. And now what I want to do is take a look at the brush. So I'm going to click on that brush again, and notice that the main difference is I changed the diameter, and so it's small now. Originally it was like 600 pixels. So now if we go to our directory, again it's under the Krita directory, Paint Op Presets, and in there you'll see that there are now two files. And if we look at it, view it by details is probably a good way to look at it. You can look at the times. Now this is the same time, but the one that is not a backup, the backup one is the original one, and in this particular case it has a large brush size. And the one that does not have the word backup in there is the current version. So what we did was, what Krita did was it stored the original brush as a backup, and then it updated the current brush. Now if we go up one directory and look at the Paint Up preset blacklist, we look now there are two files listed in there. One is the backup, and the other one is actually the original brush, the real default brush. So what's happening is that we actually have three different versions of the brush. The original one that lives in this location, the one that's our backup, which lives in underneath the Krita Paint Op Presets, which is this one right here, and we have a third one, which is the current brush. And so what the blacklist is telling us, it's saying of all three of those, ignore the original one and ignore the backup one, and that leaves only one brush, this latest one here, that will show up. And so that's why it shows up here in the list. So let's do another thing. So I'm going to go back into that brush. Let's make another change. Again, let's make it even a smaller diameter. And now I'm going to save to a new brush preset. Here I'm going to call it test. And let's just load an existing, no, let's not load an existing thumbnail. Let's load an icon from the library. And in doing that, let's just pick any interesting thing here. And you can add icons over to the side, and you can even put paint a little bit on there. So if I had a thing to paint, I can just click and paint, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to click on OK, and I'm just going to call it test, and I'm going to save that. So now to show that it's saved, I'm going to click in the search box and type in test, and there we have our brush, and I can go ahead and paint. Now let's take a look at the directories, and notice we've got a new brush, test. So that's a brand new brush. It didn't replace the Airbrush Soft. It's a brand new one. And as I look at the blacklist, there's nothing added because we didn't replace anything. But of course, if I go back in there and I edit the settings, let's make the size pressure dependent. And again, so we see that that made a change. And so I'm going to overwrite the brush. And here's a little interesting artifact. It's kind of scaled out a little bit, but if I change to a different brush set and look for it again, it resets it properly. One interesting artifact that you'll notice is really, in order to search for something, I need to select all. If I select any of the subsets, the searching doesn't seem to work properly. So notice as I type in test, it finds it if I have all selected. So if I go back into the folder, we see, just like what happened before, the original brush, the original test, is saved as a backup. And so the current one, which has pressure sensitivity for the size, is saved as the current test brush. And of course, as I look at the blacklist, we see that a new file, the backup file, has been saved. Now, no original default one has been saved because I just had saved this one as a brand new brush. Okay, I got rid of all that junky drawing. But now what I want to do is I actually want to delete the brush. Now, notice there is no trash can or anything to delete it here, but if I click on these four squares, the brushes come up. I'm going to select all. Sorry, you can't see that it went off the screen. But type in test like we were doing. And I'm now going to click on this brush and select the trash can. Oh, I've deleted my brush. So that might be a little bit scary. And if I look over here, even though that icon's showing up, if I click on all and type in test, we see it doesn't exist. It's not showing up in the list. So that brush is gone. But if we look back in the directory, we see that it's actually still there. That brush is still there, and its backup is there. So we actually still have two copies of that like we've originally had. So it really didn't go anywhere. Deleting it, all that it really did, and let's refresh here, all that it really did was it added both the backup and the current brush to the blacklist. Now let me go ahead and I'm just going to go in here and delete that little entry there that says file, and I'm going to save that. And so what's going to happen now, unfortunately, is a little bit of a bug because two test images will show up. And when we look at the blacklist, we see that when it did the backup, it placed a backslash instead of a forward slash. I'm not sure why originally it shows up, but the easy way to fix that is just change the backslash into a forward slash. This may be something that is specific to Windows as opposed to Mac because they use different styles on the slashes. Let me go ahead and save that. And now I will restart Krita. And when I do and search for the test, there's only one file there. Now this is the brush that has the size sensitivity, which is the second one, because we are hiding the backup. So if we want to get back to the original, here's what we need to do. Bring up the blacklist and just get rid of any of the ones that are blacklisted that you don't want, since we only had one backup. I got rid of that. And I'm going to go to the file, get rid of the latest one, because that's the one we want to get rid of. We want to go back to the original. So I'm going to just delete that. And now I'm just going to rename the backup just to test. Now I restart. And here we now have that same brush without the size dependent on pressure. So the key takeaways are that you can't really get rid of the default brushes unless you actually go into the program files location and actually delete them. Really what's happening when you delete them is just creating a list of things that you don't want to show up anymore. And Krita will always make these backup files. So as long as you don't get rid of those, you will have all the different versions that got saved. But you can easily delete them and go back to the original one. So it's really pretty safe to make changes to the presets to brushes. So I hope that was helpful. I know it can be kind of confusing, but if you play around with it and watch this a couple of times, maybe it'll be clear to you.